Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us on another episode of Decrypting IT. I'm your host, Ashley Wallace, Client Success Lead here at Catalyst Network Group. Today, we're talking about a critical but often overlooked aspect of cybersecurity: business continuity and disaster recovery, or as we all know as BCDR. In a world where ransomware attacks just can grind operations to a halt in a matter of minutes, having strong backups just doesn't seem to be enough anymore. So, modern BCDR strategies go beyond traditional recovery to ensure your organization can not only bounce back, but keep operating no matter what happens. We're going to explore what's missing from most plans today, the role of immutable backups, what they are, and why this isn't just an IT problem. It's really a business survival strategy at this point. Joining me is Brian Williams. He's a senior sales engineer at Rubrik. And Brian has over 20 years of experience in internal IT and in the technology consultancy sector. So, with a strong foundation in systems and network architecture, Brian has consistently focused on enhancing security, which has led to his active role on incident response teams and where he's assisting organizations in ransomware recovery efforts today. At Rubrik, Brian leverages his expertise to lead innovative backup and cyber recovery solutions, empowering clients to fortify their overall security posture. So thanks for joining us. We're so excited to have you on and to be talking with us about BCDR today.
Yeah, no, actually, huge thanks for Catalyst for having me on here. I've been wanting to do this for a while, so now's our chance.
Yes, we're excited. So let's start off with just give us a little bit of background for those who don't know Rubrik. Tell us who Rubrik is. What do you guys specialize in? And I think we already kind of covered what your role is, but just how you're helping organizations there at Rubrik.
Yes, Rubrik was founded in 2014 to essentially solve the problem of overly complex backup infrastructures, right? We always talk about security being the enemy of, the complexity being the enemy of security, things like that. And so Rubrik in 2014 transformed how we just do backups. The way
Hmm.
they do it was different, and so they're very disruptive to the market. And then 2017, on the advent of ransomware as a service, making it extraordinarily easy for people to pull these attacks off. Those fundamental aspects, the immutability, the zero trust architecture, all those things came into play very strongly. And then as the threat landscape has evolved, Rubrik has sought to meet those challenges where they are in the field. And so now today, Rubrik is one of the leading, cyber recovery platforms out available in the market. So that's what we do, right?
Yeah.
At Rubrik, we bring people back online from the depths of like the most terrible day you can have in IT, which we're going to be talking about today,
Yeah.
which is kind of our specialty.
Awesome. Well, thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks for clarifying. And
yeah,
we know who to lean on. Should we have some
it's true.
assistance. So, as a partner of ours, we're thankful to have your expertise. So let's start off with just the role of BCR in modern cybersecurity. So as I mentioned, I feel like it's something that's overlooked a lot when we're talking about cybersecurity, and so that's the focus today. So how does the industry define business continuity and disaster recovery, would you say?
Yeah, so that's a really salient point, right? Because oftentimes when people look at BCDR, they focus on the DR aspect of it. And so people think, well, it's just, if something bad happens, I can get back up and running somewhere else, right?
Hmm.
But the focus I like to stay on is business continuity, right? Whatever it takes to maintain the uptime of whatever applications or services that you're delivering to your customers, as it may be, right? So, BCDR is really defined as, uptime. Really, that's really the
Yeah.
summation of BCDR. Ultimately, the outcome is sustained uptime. So that's kind of how we look at it.
Yeah, that's great. And what would you say his would be included in a modern, we'll call it modern BCDR plan beyond just traditional backups? Like what does the difference look like there?
Yeah, so it's really about a scale, right? So you can have
Hmm.
a backup, but that doesn't mean you have a business continuity or a disaster recovery plan, right? The backups is really just a piece of that puzzle. Wrapped around that should be a tremendous amount of policies, procedures. There should be metrics. There should be a sheet in the very back that has like where people sign to say, hey, we've done these testing, right? So oftentimes the
Okay.
modern BCR plan comes with a bunch of dust on it because no one really is using it. They'll write it, set it on a shelf, and never touched again. That's a huge problem, which again, we're going to talk about a little bit later in today's podcast.
Yeah, as far as they're not testing the plans on a regular basis or updating them on a regular basis. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, they're not testing it on a regular basis. They're just checking a box,
Got
right?
it.
And when you're just checking a box, you're really dismissing the amount of risk involved with not understanding from the top to the bottom of every step of the way, every aspect of that recovery has to be accounted for. And the sheer number of people that have to be involved typically really kind of keys into why people aren't testing these things, because you got to get all these people together at one time at a table to start testing these things, which just doesn't happen that much.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of coordination between teams and things. Got
Yep.
it.
If done right, yeah, there should be people you hardly ever see in the building should be at the table, right?
Yeah, good to know. So, why would you say it's no longer just an IT issue and it's business critical? I mean, we sort of covered that already as far
Yeah.
as continuing the business, focusing on uptime. Anything else you would say that makes it business critical as far as strategic outlay?
Yeah. So a lot of people have foisted this onto IT as a catch-all. Well, this is a technology problem for business continuity. Not true, right? Everything in an organization relies on uptime, and so it's everybody. So CEO, CFO, we're talking public sector, right? County commissioners are going to be involved, city managers involved. So all these people who don't put hands on keyboard from an IT perspective have to be involved in the BCDR plan. So that's why it's more than just IT. It is
Right.
all hands on deck. Everyone has a part to play. No one is immune to these things. And I think, some of the worst examples of BCDR plans I've seen out there only include IT. The more comprehensive one I'm seeing include the CXOs, right? The C-suite, because or the county commissioners, city managers, those people, because that's how that's what takes it from bad to great, is a comprehensive understanding of everyone's role and what they have to do in the event of that situation.
Great. So, if you had to summarize how it shifted, the strategy shifted in the last 5 years, I'd imagine that with the rise in not just the type of cybersecurity ransomware we're seeing, but like also the amount that we're seeing has just increased, and it's going to continue to increase and continue to evolve, right? So,
Yeah.
how has that strategy shifted?
Yeah. So that's a great question, truly, because most people have a plan for fire, flood, famine, kaiju, right? They have a plan for if something natural disasters, acts of God takes out their,
Hmm.
data center one or whatever it may be. They have a plan for that. They've been planning that since like the 70s, right? What they haven't planned for, though, is what happens when the bad guy is behind your firewall, right? So now we have like human nefarious behavior with full access to everything. And so the way the landscape has shifted, and really the BCDR plan have shifted, is now they have to not only plan for all the things we have been planning for years, but now we have to plan for assuming breach, assuming someone has
Hmm.
gotten through our castle walls into our environment. What do we do then? How do we recover if someone has the keys to our doors and walks in? And so
Hmm.
that's really the biggest shift I'm starting to see now. It's been a slow movement because industry doesn't change instantly overnight, but I think enough evidence has presented itself now, especially with the advent of like easier access to ransomware tools for people who don't know anything about ransomware. I think it's now is getting the attention it should. So that's really where I've seen this shift. And it's been more about, okay, I'm not so much worried that a meteor is going to crash through my data center and destroy everything. I'm more worried about an
Right.
insider threat or someone impersonating an insider pulling up a nefarious activity.
We're seeing a lot of it in like with the AI, the rise of AI, and the threats have just, those have evolved. I think some of those insider threats or what appear to be insider threats, like the impersonations, have definitely been on the rise as well. So good call out. Let's talk about where companies are falling short. So I think you're aware we here at Catalyst, we did an annual cybersecurity report, and our findings were pretty interesting when it came to BCDR, so and incident response planning. 53% of clients had no IR plan, incident response plan, and 68% had no BCDR plan. Why do you think that's still so common?
It's a lot of work, you know? It's a lot of work for something that may be avoidable, or, not everyone is going to get hit in the scatter shot of ransomware. Although these things, interesting enough, do happen sort of like regionally at a time,
Hmm.
which is
Hmm.
very interesting, but another topic for another podcast. But it really comes down to, IT groups are always being asked to do more with less. And it often falls upon IT to bring these challenges to the conference room to have a discussion about it.
Hmm.
But then who owns it? Not only who owns it, who's going to be the public face of it at that point? Who's going to execute it? So there's a
Yeah.
lot of work to something that may not be ever executed ever. And so when you think about prioritization of things in an organization, that's what people are looking at. They obviously want to reduce risk, but then how much
Yeah.
effort do they have to put in to reduce that risk? Is there a fair trade-off? Now, in my mind, you're crazy not to have an IR plan. You're
Yeah.
crazy not to have a BCDR plan. You're even crazier if you have one, but it's never been dusted off since the 90s. That's a problem, right?
Right.
And I'm not
Yeah.
making this stuff up. I've seen like people, hey, let me see your IR plan. They will go to a shelf that looks like it's been there since the 80s, and they'll pull a book off and they'll dust it off like, here you
Wild.
go. What good is that?
Yeah.
What good is that, right?
Yeah.
So again, so I would say these numbers sound honestly. I thought that's a little higher than I thought. To
Is
be honest
it?
with you, actually,
Okay.
I thought it's a little higher than I thought it would be, but it's not surprising. Again, so
Okay.
the complexities, the ownership, the time sink into it, money, right? How
Yep.
much money is this going to cost for something that is ephemeral and in their minds, how likely is that to happen? And that we know the truth, like very likely.
Very
But
likely,
if you're
especially now, right? We're seeing this rise. We're seeing, attacks get better and better. So, I think what I've always heard recently, especially is it's not if, but when,
when,
right? That it's
yeah,
going to happen to your organization. And really
yeah,
no matter the size too, right?
that's a great point. No matter the size, because what people think is, well, I'm just a small city or small town or just a small mom and pop organization. Guess what? The exact same tool set, these state sponsored tool sets that all these Fortune 10 companies are facing attacks from, that mom and pop store is also bearing the brunt of too.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what size you are,
Yeah.
you're still being sought after and attacked on a daily basis using the same tools that are created by state sponsored terrorism.
Yeah. That's crazy. That's crazy. Well, I was going to ask you if you thought that companies generally underestimate time and resources needed to execute a recovery. You sort of just touched on that already, and you
Yeah,
would probably
feel
say yes.
very strongly agree. Yes, yes, very
Okay.
strongly agree that I wouldn't say that the risk is necessarily minimized. I would say that prioritization still has a legacy mindset of, well, I need a second copy of my data, right? While that
Hmm.
may be true in a perfect world, you know what you need? You need that copy of the data to be survivable no matter what. That's the
Yeah.
outcome you're looking for, right? No matter the situation. And
Good
so
differentiation. Yeah.
absolutely, right? So it's yeah, a lot of prioritization, budget, but
Yep.
these days, I'm a solutions engineer, so I'm often on the side of the table during pre-sales, consultation, and one of the things I love about my job. And I'm often hearing all these times like, that's nice, but dot dot dot
Yep.
budget,
Yep.
and so, but what's nice is now if you start mentioning cyber, in your budget request, well, all of a sudden money starts to be found, right?
Yep.
That may not be ubiquitous, but that is something I'm starting to see as a trend. Is people are starting to take this more seriously now, and so that's
Uh-huh.
a good thing.
Good. Is it part of a requirement by cyber insurance companies to have BCDR strategies on some
Absolutely,
policies?
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Depending on what your policy is for, the sort of soup du jour, right, these days is the cybersecurity policy, which really didn't have a big impact 10 years ago, 8 years
Mhm.
ago. Now it's you have to have it, right? In
Yep.
order to even receive that type of coverage, there's a minimum threshold, minimum viable threshold of things you need. And so those are absolutely encapsulated inside that IR or BCDR plan.
Good. Good to know. What would you say is a common or like a couple common misconceptions about BCDR when you are working like in the mid-market? Now that's kind of, targeted, but curious around mid-market and if you see some differences there.
I wouldn't say I see any differences there other than scale and budget available.
Mhm.
um, you know, and then also I think the sort of the mid-market area really suffers the most from a lack of talent. And I mean that the best way. Here's what I mean. Most very talented people from BCDR, from incident recovery, from cyber this, cyber that, doesn't matter. They're gonna get pulled in one or two ways. They're either gonna get pulled into private sector from like Fortune 500 companies who have a big budget, or they're gonna have a driving need to support their organizations. So they're gonna move to public sector. So what we see is a gap of talent in that mid-market space, which
Interesting.
unfortunately makes it very ripe for attack.
Got it. So more targeted.
More targeted, easier, right? Again, just like in IT in general, those teams are being asked to do more with less.
Yeah.
And so I bet you every day those teams receive tons of asks from their leadership that it goes on the board. Yeah, we'll get to it, right?
Yeah.
When we accomplish these other things. And so again, it goes back to prioritization, budget available, what's important to them.
Yeah.
And so mid-market is, but interestingly enough, they still react the same from the same tool sets that are used public sector, Fortune 10 companies.
Mhm.
They're still so they have a good response rate. I don't see any, I guess at the very top view, I think they're working harder than the Fortune 100 companies in public sector sometimes because of the lack of talent, lack of budget. But they're still responding very well based on the tool sets that are available to them today.
Okay. Well, that's good. I want to switch over to immutability and
Mm,
air gap backups. So, in plain terms, for the non-technical folks like myself, what
sure.
does immutability mean for backup systems? Like, let's explain that.
Yeah, so it kind of ties back to data survivability, right? That's where everything really hinges. It doesn't matter if we're talking cyber or acts of God, right? The data must survive. Immutability is a factor into that. Immutability at its simplest form is the inability to change or edit data once it has been processed, right? So in the case of backup
Okay.
data, once backup data is written to a platform, immutability means once that's been written, it cannot be edited or changed. This is key. Over 70% of the people who get attacked by a cyber incident have their backup data or agency to their backup data removed. And the reason for that is the data was not immutable. So that's always step one.
Okay. Got it. I was going to ask, why does it matter specifically in a ransomware scenario?
Yeah. So, bad guys, they got smart, right? It used to be that back in the long, long ago, as you can tell from the gray in my beard, a long, long ago, really all we cared about from backups was if someone deleted something or something got corrupted.
Yeah.
So we, in our drive to be efficient, we made that data as easily accessible as humanly possible, just hanging out in the network. Why? Well, because if Barbara needs a SQL database restored, well, we need to do that super fast. The problem with that is, with that inherent accessibility, there's risk. Because again, what happens when the bad guy's behind the firewall? Now they have a field day with that data sitting out in the network somewhere. So that's one of the things that was solved in 2014. Rubrik, come to the market was that immutable storage to prevent that from happening. Now tons of people do it now, which is fine, but I want to keep it pretty general. Immutability is absolutely required.
Got it. Well, I was going to ask, what are examples of solutions off of this, and how does Rubrik differentiate?
Yeah, I don't want to get too much into that on the specifics. But there's a couple of ways to solve immutability out there. So you could do it on the storage layer. So you could take a software, that's backup software, write data to a third-party storage target and let the storage target handle the immutability. Okay, so like NetApps and Pures, they can do that, right? The other is, sending it to the cloud. Putting data in the cloud, you can use native tools like Object Lock or Blobble of immutability from a cloud standpoint. The other way is you just have a platform that inherently ensures that any data written to it is marked with immutability. And there's a couple of them out there. Rubrik's one of those that just does it by default. Then you have the others like the Dells, the Commvaults, and what have you. They sort of Veeams and stuff like that. They require third-party storage. The outcome's the same. The immutability still gets applied. It's just a matter of how you go about it.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
What are some of the common pitfalls you've seen when organizations think they have secure backups, but they really don't?
Yeah. So what they do is they look at a checklist and they say, "Hey, I have immutability, I have air gapping, and everything's encrypted. I'm good." Right? Um, you know, that's unfortunately sort of a folly because first of all, none of those things are created equal. And checkboxes are just checkboxes. So, as far as I hate people going through a checkbox because they think they've accomplished something. The problem is just because the data becomes survivable, that's always step one. But if you manage to
Hmm.
pass that, well, great. But in the event of like a cyber incident, there's so many more things you need to know, right? And I've unfortunately front row seat to that.
Yeah.
Prior to my term at Rubrik, here at Rubrik, I see you need to understand what's happening in the environment. So you need to understand like, okay, what's been impacted by the cyber incident, right? Where do I even start recovering from? Where's my
Hmm.
sensitive information, right? Actually, I can tell you from personal experience, someone's going to come into that conference room and say, hey, was this a breach or just an attack? You need to know that because there is very specific legal requirements and
Wow.
language around breach or just attack, right? So you need to understand where that sensitive, that HIPAA information possibly is. The biggest one for me, though, is how fast can I return to business operations without reinfecting myself? That's huge,
Yeah.
right? So the difference is if I just have the data available, that's great. That's step one. But if I don't have those other things, I'm still measuring my recovery from any kind of incident with a calendar, not a watch. So that's one of the things is people think they're covered. I guess that's they get a little overconfident. Oh, I have immutability. I have the encryption. You know, it's
It's
not enough.
part of the story.
It's part of the story.
Part of the story.
Just all a part of it. Yeah.
Let's talk about costs now that we've discussed that. So you've got the backups, but you're not able to, you've checked the boxes, but it's not functional in the way that you think that it would be in those scenarios. What are some of the financial or operational consequences you've seen organizations when they don't recover quickly and they're going by the calendar versus the watch?
Yeah. So again, uptime, right? That's where we started talking about at the top of our
Yep.
podcast today, right? Uptime is everything. So the largest financial impact is always going to be a lack of service delivery, right? So if I don't have the means or capability to return those applications or whatever service I'm delivering as quickly as possible, there is a demonstrable measured effect that has, right? You
Hmm.
can ask someone, how much money would you lose if your primary business application was offline for an hour? I guarantee you, actually, someone has that answer.
Oh yeah.
So then you extrapolate it out. Okay, well, if I'm down 17 hours, what does that look like? And having that conversation is going to make someone in the room very nervous because they know those numbers. The
Right.
other is, well, especially in public sector, there's a lot of people's information just out there available, right? So if a city or county get attacked, well, now that city or county they don't really have an application necessarily other than collecting taxes or permitting or parking or stuff like that. But what happens when you have to give like 1.5 million people, like credit lock for a year at $15.99 a month, right? That's an impact
Another
financially.
cost.
That's a
Yeah.
cost, right? The other is obviously regulatory, right?
Yep.
There's I don't know, I don't remember the exact number, but there is a dollar value tied to each HIPAA record that is released to the public without consent. So you can imagine if like a
Oh wow.
DHHS gets hit, millions upon millions of records. So even if that's only like $10 per record per
Adds up.
person, it adds
Yeah.
up,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Right.
So I kind of categorize it in three ways. I categorize it in, the lack of income ingest due to service delivery disruption, and then also I'm having to now pay LifeLock for people, so there's a
Yep.
there's a cost associated with that, and then of course, right, any kind of regulatory situation where we have to be very careful in the public sector where I typically work because that's a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of scary. There are notices that have to go out in those situations as well. I think. Right. To all
Yeah.
those folks.
Yeah, not too long ago, North Carolina had to do that. It wasn't even a breach; it was just a suspicion of data release. This was about 7 years ago,
Hmm.
and a former coworker of mine, her husband at the time, worked for a Department of Corrections, and he got the notice that, hey, your information may have been released, so we're going to give you the life lock or credit lock, or whatever, for a year. And they had to do it for
Oh
everyone who was employed at the state for that period of time.
wow.
So kind of crazy.
Yeah, it is. I mean, when you see the dollar dollar signs in front of that number, it's a big one.
It is. Yeah.
Well, we talked about ransomware threats evolving. We talked about a little bit about BCR strategies evolving in response to that. Can we go into that a little bit more? Like thinking around, like, do you think that the speed of ransomware evolution is outpacing companies' abilities to adapt?
Okay. So we're going to steer into a little bit of the opinion of Brian, right, versus fact. I just want to make that, since this is public, I want to make sure that's known. Like,
Yeah.
this is my opinion. I do think that the malware, the malefactors, and nefarious activities of people around the world are going to far outpace the defense of those things, right? Because steering back into factual, like there's a thing called zero-day attacks where no one knows about it, and all of a sudden it's being exploited, right? So if no one knows about it, the bad guys find it. There is no defense for it. That's why it's a zero-day. So
Yep.
that's made manifest right there that the bad guys do outpace the good guys. So I do see that trend continuing. It's just a matter of like you can only fight what you know about, and with how easy it is to get malware, with how easy it is now to create malware, right? I don't want to lean too far into AI because I think we want to talk about it a little bit later, but with ChatGPT out there and people vibe coding their way through malware, I think it's just going to accelerate.
Yeah. I know, it's wild, right? There's
Yeah.
some crazy stuff going on. Where do you see the future of disaster recovery heading? Like with automation, AI, backup validation, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so we're already a good way there from an automation standpoint, right? There's a lot of
Mhm.
tools out there that you can utilize to click a button, and now I am doing the DR thing, right? I am achieving the outcome of moving something from one place to another and making sure it works. So we've had that for a long time. I think where I would like to see it go is more of an automated response, but that's where we're going to kind of like have to let AI into our front door a little bit to read the room, and where certain conditions are met, then the BCDR plan is enacted. And we're starting to see a little bit of that start to bleed through as well, right? I know Rubrik has Ruby, the generative AI companion, where Rubrik can look at the backups, and if there is some type of nefarious activity, Ruby can alert you to those things and give you the ability through voice prompts to then measure your response. And that's not
Awesome.
just a Ruby thing. There's plenty of people working on that right now, but
Yep.
that's kind of where I see it coming is automation. We already have that, but determining when things should go is still human, mostly human activity. I'd like to see
Mhm.
that, and I'm pretty sure we're going to see that become more machine than man.
Cool. That'll be interesting and watching it just evolve along with threats is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. What for companies starting? Let's say we're starting from scratch. So let's talk to these 58% and the 68% that didn't have an IR plan or BCDR. What are the first 2 to 3 things they should prioritize?
Yeah. So I think pen to paper, they really need to have two thoughts around the outcome they need. So the first thought is, how do I plan for someone behind the firewall? Right? The bad guy, if the call's coming from inside the house, how do I adjust to that? The other is standard. What happens if, fire, flood, famine, kaiju, tornado, whatever happens? I need to understand that. The first thing they need to consider is what are they solving for? Right?
Okay.
And that can go a couple different ways. The next thing they need to solve for is I need data survivability. It doesn't matter what happens. I need that data to survive. Does that mean I need one copy? Does that mean I need a copy somewhere else? Does that mean I'm putting things in the cloud? Right? It doesn't matter what that looks like, but those are the outcomes they want. They need kind of a hybrid. They need to plan for just IR, instant
Yep.
response. They need to
Mhm.
drill for that, a lot. And then, fire flow, famine, kaiju, acts of God. Like they got to plan for those things. And then based on those things, they need data survivability. And it doesn't matter how many copies of data, that more the merrier. But in that case, that's what they need. That's the first things they need to do is what am I solving for? Data survivability.
Mhm.
After that, it could go a lot different ways.
Okay, that makes sense. What about folks that they think they've got, the cloud provides backups, they're good, but they haven't validated anything? Scenario.
Oh gosh, Ashley. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing people going to cloud was cheap and easy. And I hear it all the time. Like, so I talk to a lot of people that have 365 and 365 data, and I say, well, okay, well, let's talk about that. What's protecting that? Oh, Microsoft's got it, right?
Mm.
Well, no, not so much. Validation of things is incredibly important. You should never assume that just because something is in the cloud means that that vendor is actively protecting it. So that's true with things like 365 Dynamics. That's true with any of your business applications. Think about Munis from Tyler Tech. Is that in the cloud? Box.com. Like people use that a lot.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter. You just have to validate very specifically, are they backing it up? Yes or no? And if they are they testing those back? Because
Yeah,
it's one thing to have a backup. That's good. Great. But if you can't restore your business operations from that backup, what good is it?
yeah. How often should it be validated, or how often should they be testing it?
So I was asked, I get asked that a lot actually, and the the I don't want to give the lazy answer of it depends, but it kind of does, right? Like the chief risk officer or CISO or CIO, they're really going to define that. But I would say at a
Okay,
minimum, you probably need to make sure that you do some sort of minimalistic, minimum viable test monthly
got it. Okay,
with incident responses quarterly and DR tests, I would say every 6 months. I
okay.
say if you do that, then you're going to have quite a bit of confidence going to any room and someone says, hey, are our backups okay? You're going to feel pretty good about it.
Yeah. And when you say the IR, you're talking about testing the incident response plan on a quarterly basis.
Correct.
Is that what you said?
And
Okay, just confirming.
that is, yeah, exactly what I'm saying. So when I talk about IR, incident response, I'm really sort of thinking about it in the lens of cyber recovery, a cyber incident, because statistically, that's what people are going to run into more than
Mhm.
a tornado tearing. I mean, that tornadoes happen. Don't get me wrong, but data centers now are built so robust that they're rated for Cat 5 hurricanes, right?
Yeah.
So it's still a risk. Don't get me wrong, it's still a risk. But I think testing your response, building that muscle memory to recovering or at least beginning to recover from a cyber incident has tremendous value.
Right.
The reason for that is like time is everything.
Mhm.
And typically with a cyber incident, the underlying infrastructure is not impacted. So you don't have to fail over from one site to the other from a DR perspective. You can do everything from that one site you're still in there because
Mhm.
the ransomware didn't melt your infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
It didn't catch it on fire, unlikely I would say. And so you have everything you need to get back up and running, so long as you have data survivability. But where people get tripped up is they think, well, it's never going to happen to me. If I got the tools, I'm good. I'll figure it out. That's the wrong mindset to have. You really need to have that muscle memory drilled into you so that whatever happens according to our plan, you know what to do. Because
Yep.
again, downtime can not only be a financial issue, it can be a problem for safety, public safety.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, being able to understand their everybody being able to understand their roles and responsibilities with related is going to improve the efficiency of that plan and therefore reduce the downtime, right?
It is. It's again, it's going to take you from a a large fog of war of not understanding what your next move is into very confidently understanding everyone has a role to play and this is my part to play in this recovery. It's the difference between like watching like a sports team. You've seen bad sports teams. They look like they're very uncoordinated. No one knows what the other person's doing. They don't trust the people around them to do their jobs. And then you see a professional sports team play. Everyone knows their role. They've been through it multiple times. They practice it day in, day out. They've internalized it. The muscle memory is there. That's the difference, right?
Yeah.
And so time wise, you could see days between the difference of recovery between a team who knows what they have but haven't ever used it versus a team that is very practiced in that recovery.
Great. Good to know. That's a really good advice. What is one question every CEO should be asking their IT team about BCDR right now?
Yeah, the one question would be, I think, that they need to be asking is on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you of bringing our business applications back online in 24 hours or less, no matter what happens?
The last line is key. No matter
No
what
matter what
happens.
happens.
Yeah.
Right.
I like that.
Yep. Yeah. Because the C-suite, the CXOs are going to have a metric tied to business downtime. And I use 24 hours as an example. That is pretty aggressive, but I've seen cases where people can return to business operations in 24 hours or less
Wow, that's
using the right
amazing.
tools. Yeah.
That's amazing. Awesome. Um, I'm trying to think, is there anything that you feel like we've missed that you feel is critical that we share?
Yeah. So I guess the biggest piece is like you can't always accomplish all your goals all at once. So sometimes we have to be very strategic and methodical about how we apply these things. So oftentimes I tell people just start with the basics. Data survivability. Just that piece alone will help you keep your job, right? After that, everything else should be really geared towards shortening that mean time to recovery. What information do I need? And
Mhm.
what tools will give me that information to lower that mean time to recovery, the MTTR, right? So everyone thinks, well, this is overly complicated. It's super expensive. No one has time for this. I mean, a lot of those things are true. Like, this is not an easy process. This is one of those things we got to take our medicine. In order to respond appropriately, we have to put the time in, we have to put the effort in, we have to put the budget in. Otherwise, you're going to be a statistic on the news, and no one wants that.
Right. Yep. Great advice. I like those key points. Thanks for sharing all this. I
Yeah.
think you've been a great resource for information today. So I appreciate their participation
Yeah.
and everything. If you guys have questions about backups, CCDR strategy, you can reach out to us here at Catalyst. We do partner with Rubric as well. So we have connection with Brian. And you can go to our website, catalystng.com, to reach out to us or email us at podcast@catalystng.com. We'll be sharing the link to our annual cybersecurity report in the show notes down below as well. So check that out if you haven't. And then, of course, if you found today's episode valuable and helpful, give it a share and don't forget to hit subscribe. Thanks again for joining us on Decrypting IT. Brian, thank you so much again. We appreciate your participation.
Of course. Thank you
Until
so
next
much.
time. Yeah, until next time, stay secure and stay ahead, you guys. Bye. Thanks, Brian.